Nursing Research Unit Journal Club. It's slightly different this month to usual, because usually I'm chairing, but this month I'll be it's transcribing everything I say now. That's strange. Yeah, so I'll be presenting a paper rather than chairing the discussion today. So this usual format applies, that I'll present for about 15 minutes, and then we'll have 15 minutes for Q&A at the end, and a bit of extra time if people want to hang around. But obviously, if people need to go at past, feel free to head off. So the paper I'm going to be talking about is this paper that was published a couple of years ago now. So it's called "It Was Me Answering My Own Questions: Experiences of Method and Levels Therapy Amongst People with First Episode of Psychosis." And it's sort of quite an unusual title, but the title came from a quote from a participant that I thought was a really good summary of lots of people's experience of method and levels as a way of discovering solutions to your own problems, and sort of having a chance to develop your own new perspectives on problems. Just a few acknowledgements to start with. So Warren is here. So this paper was conducted as part of my PhD that was funded through the NIHR through the Clinical Doctoral Research Fellowship Programme. And Sarah, Warren, Tim and Dawn were my PhD supervisors for the next level study, which was the wider study that I did for my PhD. And Heather Peel is a services researcher who's based at Psychosis Research Unit, and she was involved in this aspect of the project and was a co-author on this project. So because of time, I'm just going to give a very quick overview of what method and levels is, because it's lots of people are unfamiliar with it. So just briefly, it's often described as a transdiagnostic or adiagnostic cognitive therapy. So unlike lots of forms of cognitive therapy, which are designed with particular disorders in mind, you know, CBT for social anxiety or CBT for depression, MOL is designed to be used. The process remains the same, irrespective of any diagnosis the person might have received or the nature of the problems the person's coming along to talk about. It applies perceptual control theory to the practice of psychotherapy. So perceptual control theory is a theory of human behaviour that was developed by Bill Powers. And a kind of fundamental tenet of the theory is that having control over important aspects of your life is fundamental to human health and mental health. And one of the things that's believed to disrupt control is goal conflict. So one of the aims of MOL is to help people resolve goal conflicts that are believed to maintain psychological distress. And I guess one of the things I'm talking about in the paper later on is that it uses this system of appointment scheduling called patient-led appointment scheduling, which, just to give a quick overview of how it works in practice. So rather than the therapist or service saying, we will offer you X amount of sessions, 14 sessions, 16 sessions, whatever it is, the principle of patient-led appointment scheduling is that you make the resource available, in this case, is psychological therapy, and you make sure that people know how to access it and when the resource is available. And then you hand over the choice to patients, service users, in terms of how they access it, in terms of frequency and duration of sessions. And that's a really important principle of method and levels, that people have control over how they access it and also control over what's discussed within sessions. There isn't time to give a huge amount of detail about what the intervention actually looks like, but just to give us a flavour of what MOL looks like in practice, therapists delivering method levels are sticking to these two goals of therapy. So the first goal is they're encouraging the client to talk freely about the problems, and obviously that's going to vary quite a lot between clients in terms of what's going to help clients feel comfortable to discuss their problems. And once the person is talking about the problems, the second goal for the therapist is to pay attention to what are called disruptions, which is sort of indications that the person's awareness might have shifted from the topic of conversation onto related background thoughts. So the person might pause or emphasize a certain word or use an unusual word, or their body language might change in some way. And when that happens, the therapist's job is to ask about that and then revert to the first goal of encouraging the client to talk about it. So someone might be talking about the voice hearing. They might look slightly puzzled or look off to the side, and you might ask what's happening, and someone might say, well, it just sounds a bit weird talking about hearing voices, and then the therapist would ask, or would tell me about the, what it's like feeling weird, or what the weirdness is, something like that. The wider next level study itself, which this study formed a part of, was a randomized control trial with a nested feasibility study. And the aims were to evaluate the feasibility and acceptability of method levels for people using early intervention and psychosis services. And the RCT included 36 participants, 19 of which were allocated to the method levels arm, treatment as usual plus method levels, and 17 were allocated to treatment as usual. So that treatment as usual consisted of ongoing care from early intervention services, whatever that might look like. These were the overall research questions for the whole project. Was it feasible to recruit and retain people? Experience first episode psychosis in an RCT of method levels. Was it feasible to deliver MOL to this population? Is it an acceptable psychological intervention? And did we need to adapt MOL in some way to overcome problems or barriers in the routine implementation of MOL? The methods for the qualitative study are listed here. So all of the participants who were in the treatment arm of the trial, who'd been allocated to the method levels arm, were invited to take part in a nested qualitative study, and 12 participants agreed to be interviewed about their experiences. And we were specifically interested in, what was their experience of engaging with the method levels intervention, and also we were interested in people's views and perspectives on the patient-led appointment scheduling system. So Heather Peel conducted the interviews, and we analysed results using thematic analysis. It's a bit hard to see this thematic map on the screen, but I think hopefully everyone here would have had the paper sent out to them to be able to look at it in a bit more detail. But what this map's trying to convey is that there was sort of this central theme that method levels was helpful in terms of helping people generate new problems on their perspectives on the problems, or looking at problems from a different perspective. But these other things needed to be in place as well at the same time. So there was a theme about the therapist's approach, which was sort of helping me talk about a problem and helping me think more deeply about a problem. So it's not just talking about a problem in a very superficial way, it was actually thinking in depth about particular problems. There was a theme about being in control, and that wasn't just about being in control of the appointment scheduling, which we talked about. It's also about being able to talk about things I want to talk about. So every method level session starts with a statement of, along the lines of, is there something you'd like to talk about today, or is there a problem you'd like to talk about today? And participants said they really valued that. They liked the fact that they could focus on things that are important to them. And then there's the appointment scheduling itself. So people appreciated the availability of sessions, and they could choose how to book appointments. So they could book appointments either using an online system or by text or by phone. So there's this flexibility that people could use. And then there was this final theme about thinking and talking. So people described in method level sessions, it was a chance to explore problems and express themselves openly. So it was something about being able to not just sit there and think through their problems, but actually to express the problems to somebody else who was interested in what they were saying. And there was also this theme about talking being hard, but it helped in the long run. One participant had this really great analogy of, it being similar to when she goes to the gym and does a really hard workout, that's really draining, and she feels tired afterwards, but she feels like it's helpful in the long run. So the benefits in the longer term outweigh the sort of short-term discomfort of talking, either going to the gym or talking about a problem. I haven't got time to go through all the themes, but I just thought I'd pull a few of the themes out and some quotes connected to it, just to kind of illustrate some of the main points. So I guess helping me think more deeply. So there's a quote here about the therapist would just kind of probe a little bit more. He'd never actually, explain, oh, this is your answer, this is why. He'd go, oh, why do you think that? And what makes you think that way? And that really gets to the sort of the title of the paper as well. This idea of it was me answering my own questions. The therapist not being there to provide solutions, that actually the therapist is there to help the client generate their own solutions to these problems. this theme about MOL sessions were there if I needed them. And someone's talked about what was nice. It was very open. You had all these months you could come and go as you pleased, and that flexibility was really good. And actually, when we looked at the data in terms of how people use sessions, people really access these sessions in hugely diverse ways. Some people would come for the 2 sessions within a fortnight of having access to them, and other people would wait 6 months before they had a first session. So there's real variety in terms of how people are accessing this resource. And on the same theme, someone else talked about it was a bit like a safety net, almost then knowing it's there if I needed it. And that person went on to say, there was something beneficial about the fact that I knew I could access these sessions even if I hadn't had one for months. I knew they were there. I could go and talk about a problem, and that sort of helped day to day, just in terms of sort of feeling like her problems were manageable because she had this method of actually going to talk about a problem if she needed to go to have a discussion about them. There was this thinking and talking theme. So by me being able to talk about it in the way that I'm talking about it now, and it helps, that's important. That's the point I'm trying to make, is that I'm able to say these things and hear myself say things. And this is something that's come up a lot in the literature on method levels, that there's something really important about being able to express a problem to somebody else, or some sort of external expression of the problem being crucial in terms of resolving problems and developing new perspectives. I think I talked about that when we looked at the thematic map, but there was quite a lot of stuff came up about it being hard work but worthwhile. So I was a bit apprehensive, think I'll have to delve into some stuff here that might be upsetting, which might be hard to deal with, which it was, but it needed to be done and it helped in the long run. And then this final theme, and this is quite a long quote, I won't read all of it, but which was around sort of developing new perspectives and looking at problems in a different way. And there's a quote here from someone who had quite, really very serious difficulties. And they talked about how engaging with the method level sessions just gave them this whole different perspective on life and a different way of thinking about how life could be that they weren't looking at previously, and how helpful that was. As with any study, there's strengths and limitations. So I've just put a few here, and you might have had other thoughts whilst I've been presenting, and happy to have a chat about that in a minute. But I suppose one strength was that of the 14 participants who attended at least one MOL session, we were able to interview 12 of them. So we did get a range of views, and that was from people who'd attended perhaps one MOL session within the 10 months that the sessions have been available, up to people who'd attended 9 or 10 sessions over that time. I guess a weakness is that there were 19 participants in the MOL arm, and only 14 attended one or more sessions. So there was this group of participants that didn't attend any sessions during the 10 months that they were available. And it would have been really great to have interviewed them and find out what was that about. Was it something about the way the sessions were set up, or something about the therapy that put them off, or were there other reasons why people didn't attend? And I guess more informally, I remained in touch with those participants for other aspects of the study, and people did talk about, I just had other stuff going on in my life, I had other things that were important to me at that time, but I guess being able to capture that in a slightly more rigorous way would have been really helpful. I guess another potential limitation is that because it was a PhD, lots of the roles that might have been done by sort of wider study members in a larger study were done by me. So participants were aware that I was the trial therapist, I was also the chief investigator, and I was the lead author of the paper. And I guess one potential concern might be that perhaps people felt a bit inhibited, even though the interviews were done by Heather, that perhaps people weren't as open as they might have been about their experience of MOL because they knew that I would be analysing the data. I think we felt that having Heather as a services researcher who wasn't, the therapist conducting delivering the MOL intervention, sort of mitigate against that to a certain extent, and there was a degree of independence that Heather had that hopefully meant that people were able to be honest about their experiences. But I guess it's one of those unanswerable questions. Conscious of time, I'll just wrap up here. So I guess the overall conclusions for this bit of the the next level study, for the qualitative study, was, overwhelmingly participants reported that engagement with MOL was helpful and acceptable. So of the 12 participants, 11 said it was a helpful experience. And the one participant who said it wasn't helpful, what became pretty apparent from their interview was that they were really looking for something else in terms of help. They were looking for advice, they were looking for information sheets, and that's really not what method levels is about. So there seemed to be something really important about having this alignment between what the therapist was delivering, the MOL therapist was delivering, and what the participant was looking for in terms of a psychological intervention. And where that there was a misalignment, then potentially wasn't the most helpful experience. I guess another conclusion was, and this is kind of more generally, is that in terms of psychological therapy or mental health practice more generally, the clinicians will be experienced as most helpful when they maximise control of the process of therapy. That's both how people access therapy, but also what people actually do in therapy sessions as well. One of the final conclusions was that people were able to use method level sessions to generate novel solutions and perspectives on their problems. And this all added up, along with the other evidence from the RCT, to a conclusion that method levels was an acceptable and helpful intervention for people experiencing first episode of psychosis, and it was suitable for further testing in a larger trial. So I'm going to stop there. My contact details are there if people want to get in touch, if people have questions or want to know more, but I'm going to stop sharing my slides so I can work out how to do that. And then happy to take any questions that people have.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, feel free to just either use the hand raise function or just shout up if you've got any questions.
I'm not able to stop sharing my slides, I'm afraid, for some reason, but I can hear if people want to ask questions or.
Hi, can I ask a sort of practical question, Rob, please?
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, can hear you, Mark, yeah.
So you've conducted all these qualitative interviews and you must have gathered quite a lot of data. How challenging was it to sort of funnel that data down into something for the purposes of a sort of word-limited article?
Yeah, it took a lot of work. Yeah, it was I guess with any qualitative study, you do generate a huge amount of data, and it does take a lot of time to sort of get very familiar with it and go through and identify themes. So yeah, it was quite a long process, and yes, it took quite a long time.
Yeah. And in terms of the sheer sort of volume of data, would you have had like scores of pages? For each interview, was there several pages or? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, so I can't remember off the top of my head what the average length of interview was. So I think we had a few short interviews that was sort of maybe 10 minutes long or so, where people perhaps didn't have a huge amount to say about the intervention. But most interviews, I would say, were between 30, 40, 50 minutes long. So, when you start transcribing that, which I did, it's just a huge amount of material. So yeah, it's a very sort of labour-intensive process.
Wow. Okay, thanks, Rob.
Probably got time for a couple more questions as well, if anyone else has one.
I have a second question, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it, Mark.
Yeah.
Just in terms of when you're working with researchers sort of overseas, what's the experience of that like? Is it Australia the researchers were based, the two of the researchers?
Just one of them, yeah. So Tim Carey was based in Alice Springs at the time, is now based in Rwanda. I guess I had a really good experience doing my PhD, and I'm not saying that just because Warren's on the call, but I had a real lots of strengths in the supervisory group, and I guess I engaged with different supervisors at different times, depending on their particular expertise and strengths. And Tim, it was great to have Tim on board. So Tim, for people that don't know, is the psychologist that first sort of developed the method of levels, so it's absolutely fantastic to have him on board, and he's done a lot of the initial research into MOL. And he's very responsive on email, so he's sort of tended to have lots and lots of email discussions with Tim about questions that were coming up or getting his perspectives on things. And because he is so responsive, even though there's big time and geographical distance between us, it seemed to work very well. We had lots of catch-ups on Skype as well along the way.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about method of levels therapy before reading the paper, but there's a couple of really good videos I saw on YouTube with Tim kind of explaining the therapy, and yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, people are interested. Tim runs a website called methodoflevels.au, I think it is, which has loads of resources and videos and things. And if you're interested in perception control theory, which is the theory that underpins it, Warren has a website called pct.web, is it, Warren? Is that
pctweb.org?
pctweb.org, which has, because PCT has been applied to all sorts of different contexts, and MOL is just one application of it. So there's absolutely tons of interesting stuff to delve into on that website as well. I can see someone's got their hand up, but I can't see who it is.
Yeah, James, I think.
Oh.
Hello. So first, before I ask my question, I feel like I'm gate crashing this because I'm an undergraduate and I've not been here before, so I do apologise, and I hope you.
There's no gate crashes.
Yeah.
So, my question is to do with the client-led scheduling, because that was seen as from the participants as a real strength. Now, this was written, it was published in 2019. Now, obviously, since then, the landscape's changed such a lot, and I'm just wondering, even though it looks amazing, do you think would be valid as because of, with all the sort of government promises of sort of everybody being offered an appointment and within a certain time frame and the like, and I imagine either it being all right in theory where people would like to pick a slot, but actually in reality that isn't available, or that it wouldn't be possible for the professionals to justify their time when there's other people waiting, when they're kind of making themselves available on the off chance. Mm-hmm. And then I suppose on the side of that is there a way of making sure that the practitioner's not actually sort of working 24 hours a day or available 24 hours a day? So thank you. I hope that all made sense.
Yeah. So the question is whether. So I guess you're saying things have changed in the last couple of years. Do you mean particularly around with COVID?
Yeah, with mental health and COVID and kind of the sort of the increased, I suppose, the backlog because of people not being able to necessarily access treatment, and then also the increased occurrence of mental health or sort of illnesses across the population.
I mean, I think there are obviously resource issues in mental health services, aren't there? But I think probably what hasn't changed from my perspective is that I think coming from the perspective that the client is the person who will know best when they need a session and how long the session should be, and is best placed to decide that, hasn't changed. And actually, there's quite a lot of research been done into patient-led scheduling that sort of suggests that it's a more efficient way of organising your services. So if you give people control over how and when they access sessions, they seem to access less sessions than when services dictate that themselves. They might access sessions over a longer period of time, but the actual number of sessions they access seems to be fewer. So I think it potentially be a more efficient way of organising services, and one that's more attuned to the individual needs of people accessing services as well. It would be great to do some more, because there's kind of two things in this project. There's method levels and there's patient-led scheduling, and they work very well together. But I think it'd be great to do some research that just explored patient-led scheduling and how you might resource it, what kind of resource you might need to make sure people weren't waiting for ages to get an appointment, and obviously there has to be a balance between the resources available within the whatever mental health service you're talking about and the client demand, and those things need to be matched up. And I think we probably don't know exactly what the ratio needs to be into, when we're talking about psychological therapy of therapists to clients. But I suppose just to give you an idea of how it worked in my study, so I had 1 day a week dedicated to the method levels intervention, and I had 5 MOL slots available for up to 19 participants, and it never happened that all of those slots were taken up in 1 week. So nobody had to wait longer than 1 week to get a session when they wanted one, even though 19 is actually quite a lot of clients, you would think, to be all competing for a small number of sessions on 1 day. To compare that to when I was in early intervention services, I had a caseload of 12 at any one time, and that was for the whole week. So you could sort of see that, you know, if one therapist could meet the needs of 19 participants in a single day, potentially, if you scaled that up, that would be a much more efficient way of organising services. Does that answer your question, James?
It certainly does, and thank you for that. And apologies if it was a cynical sounding question. I was just, it was really interesting, and hope that the client-led scheduling is something that can work, because it does look really useful, to be honest. So thank you for that.
Brilliant, thanks, James. Any other? I've probably got time for one more question, if anyone's got anything.
I have a slight question. I don't, forgive me if it's a bit ignorant actually, but I just wondered whether method of levels is used in practice a lot. How widely used is it at the moment?
Well, I mean, Warren might want to chip in a bit here as well, but it's not very widely available at the moment. So there are a few people who are delivering it in practice. So there's a chap called Cuba in Sheffield, who's a CBT therapist who has a private practice, and he delivers MOL through it. There's people like, well, Warren uses it in his practice when he practices clinically, and people like Simon Ty are also using it, but it's not widely available. And when we delivered the Recovery Academy session in the trust, one of the things we say is, you know, that this isn't a widely available therapy at the moment.
Most of the organisations that have commissioned training for their practitioners to deliver method levels have been third sector organisations, so social enterprises and charities. So we've got a network of those. So 6 Degrees, Beyond Psychology, Mode Rehabilitation, Restore Control. They're examples of those organisations. And then within the NHS, you know, myself and Sarah and Rob and some others have provided training, and also to clinical psychologists in various courses. But because method levels isn't among the kind of nice recommended therapies, because the research is not of that kind to date, it's not kind of badged within NHS services, although there will be many clinicians who could deliver method levels because they've been to some training, but you know, that's not going to be a kind of a badged aspect of their portfolio, as it were, because they're providing those established therapies. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. Thank you. It just sounds great, because it's really interesting that it can be applied to so many different sort of disorders, as opposed to the disorder-specific therapies. Just sounds like it could be really useful.
Yeah, I mean, we've even got a place. So I've got a colleague in Argentina who's started up method levels clinic over there, where it's both for kind of a mental health primary care kind of group, but also he uses it with businesses as well, in terms of dealing with stress in the workplace. So yeah, it's got a real spectrum of applications, and historically it was used in schools for teachers before it was even used as a mental health intervention.
Wow, thank you. That's really interesting.
Right, we're at past, so if people need to head off, feel free to head off. I'm around for a few minutes if people want to hang around, if people have other questions. But otherwise, if you do need to go, we'll have another one of these sessions next month, and I think it's Mick McEwen next month, is it, Lucy, that's presenting? Yes, from memory, I think so. Yeah, fantastic. I'll be sending the invites out in the next week or so. So, yeah, if you're not on the mailing list, feel free to drop us an email or Rob an email, and we can add you to that. Fantastic.
Thank you ever so much. Take care.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.